Hi, Julia Usher, Recipes for a Sweet Life. It's still Easter time here in my kitchen. Today we're making marshmallow bunnies, which could also be marshmallow chicks or anything you want to shape them into. It just occurred to me that they would look fabulous in my Easter basket video that I did recently, so go check that out if you haven't already. That Easter basket, though, is relatively complex, and I assure you this project is really, really simple, so I encourage you to dive in with your young ones and make a project of it. Just some examples of what we'll be creating, lying flat here, or alternatively in an upright presentation, which can be really cute as a centerpiece on an Easter table or even in an Easter basket. So let's talk about the ingredients we'll need. There aren't that many. The key components are granulated sugar, and I'll have all the exact quantities in the video description. I just happen to know this recipe calls for 2 cups. It calls for 3 cups of light corn syrup, a cup of water that will be divided in 2 parts in the recipe. Gelatin, I'm using Knox unflavored gelatin, which looks like so when it comes out of the container, and we'll use 3 packages of that. The gelatin is what gives the marshmallow its stability. So basically we'll be making a sugar syrup, pouring it over gelatin and whipping it up until it's really light and fluffy. Now, I like sweet marshmallows, but I like marshmallows even better when they have some overriding flavor component that isn't just sugar. So to this recipe, I'm adding lemon to give them a little added zip, which I think is a really nice bright flavor for springtime. We're adding it in the form of freshly squeezed and strained lemon juice, finely minced or grated lemon zest, and also as lemon extract. Just one note, this recipe is also found in my book Cookie Swap. So if you want to check that out, I've got a whole seasonal Easter party that includes not only the Peeps, but a bunch of other cookies that are really fun. I have a whole dessert table presentation. The first step is prepping your pan. Before anything, I like to have my pan prepped so it's immediately ready to receive the marshmallow. If you wait to do this after the marshmallow is already whipped and ready to go, the marshmallow can set up and it can be really difficult to spread. So we want to get this going. And the way I do that to make sure the marshmallow comes out easily is I spray a little bit of Pam nonstick spray onto the bottom and sides of the pan because the marshmallow is going to come all the way up the sides. This is a 10 by 15 by 1 inch jelly roll pan. Now I don't want it swimming in this stuff, so I'm just going to spray it and then make sure it's really evenly spread around and there are no big pools of it. I'm going to additionally line it with a piece of parchment paper and then spray it again. Now this spray here is to allow the sugar to adhere to it because these little marshmallow bunnies are coated on both sides with colorful sanding sugar. And that gives them a nice little crunch in addition to the softness of the marshmallow. And the sugar also makes it really easy to release the big slab of marshmallow that we're going to get from the pan. So just as an indicator, I've got lots of sugar on the front side and also on the back side of these guys, the undecorated side. So I think I need a little bit more to keep this edge down. Maybe a little bit more in that corner. We'll spread it around. And then I'm going to take some colored sanding sugar. The recipe calls, in addition to the core elements for the marshmallow, it calls for colored sanding sugar, about 1 1/3 cups. I'm going to put about 2/3 down on the bottom to start, and the other 2/3 we'll use a little bit later. It's going to look like a lot, but the more you use, actually, the easier it is to get these out of the pan. So I'm just going to put it in generously. And I'm doing this on a larger sheet tray because this is why. I'm going to tip this around to make sure the sugar fully coats the sides of the pan so that the marshmallow comes out easily. And as I do that, I invariably dump some off, and it just makes easier cleanup of the counter if I do that over something. Now I'm just going to shake it evenly so I've got a nice even distribution of sugar, and we're ready for this to receive the marshmallow later. The first step in making the marshmallow is to make a sugar syrup that we're going to then pour over the gelatin. Once the sugar syrup has reached 238 degrees, which is the softball stage on the candy thermometer, it'll be ready to pour into the gelatin. Now you want to make sure to take it up to that temperature, otherwise the marshmallow may not set fully and it will be difficult to cut later. So to do that, we're going to combine 2 cups of sugar with half of the water. We've also got corn syrup going in. This is 3/4 of a cup, I believe, but check out the exact proportions in the video description. The corn syrup is an invert sugar. It's a type of sugar that will prevent my regular granulated sugar in water from recrystallizing when I elevate its temperature and bring it to a boil. Actual granulated sugar in water, just boiled, can sometimes actually revert to granulated sugar if you don't add either lemon juice or corn syrup to the mixture. So this is just a safeguard against recrystallization. Of course, adds a little sweetness as well. And we want to top it off with a little bit of salt. That always heightens flavor. It'll heighten our lemon flavor that we're going to be adding a bit later. So that all goes into the pan. I want to scrape it down pretty well so there's no sugar crystals starting out on the side of the pan. We're going to put that on medium heat to start, bring it to a boil, and then crank it up and boil it until it reaches 238 degrees Fahrenheit. So while the sugar syrup is boiling on the stove and reaching 238, I'm going to prepare the gelatin directly in my mixer. You need a stand mixer really for this project. It just gives a lot more volume to the marshmallow. I'm going to start by hydrating my meringue, and to do that, I add the additional half cup of water, the remaining half cup of water, to the bowl of my mixer, and then I'm going to gradually sprinkle the gelatin on top, roughly a tablespoon at a time, so that it hydrates. You want to see it going from powder to completely absorbed in the water. The reason you do that is just to distribute the gelatin evenly. If you just dump the powder into something, it might clump up, and you'd get lumps in your marshmallows, and you wouldn't have the same gelling power. Now, if a little bit of liquid stays on top, it's not the end of the world because we're going to be adding hot sugar syrup to it very gradually, and it should dissolve whatever residual is on top. So there's a little bit of a large dry spot there I'm going to try to avoid and sprinkle the remaining amount in the wetter areas. Now our flavorings we'll prepare as well. I've already squeezed my lemon juice and strained it. I think I want a little more lemon zest. So I'm going to go ahead and mince some of that up shortly. Now I have some minced lemon zest that can go in. It's a little chunky. If you want a really much more refined lemon zest presence in your marshmallow, it's great to use a microplaner because it'll get it even finer. This is the same tool I use for filing my cookies, guys. It works obvious. It's actually intended for doing stuff like this. So multitask kitchen tool, but you can see how nice and fine it gets that lemon zest. My minced lemon zest will do, but this is just a little bit more delicate. And I want to amp up my flavor a little bit, so I'm just going to continue. Okay, so we're all ready to receive the sugar mixture once it's ready. So let's pop on over to the stove and see what that's doing. As with any sugar syrup, I do a couple of things. One, I stir it minimally, and I try to wash down any stray sugar crystals from the side with a little bit of a water spritzer. Even though this has the invert sugar, the corn syrup in it, there's still some possibility of recrystallization, so I always take those 2 additional safeguards to prevent it. I started it on medium heat, and once the sugar is dissolved, which it looks to be fairly dissolved now, it's still kind of cloudy, but by and large it's dissolved. I will then crank it up to closer to medium-high heat and bring it to a very rapid boil. That will just accelerate the process of getting it to 238 degrees Fahrenheit. Now it's about 130, so we've got a little way to go. So it's now reached 238 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm just going to pour a little bit in to start to melt that dry gelatin on top. Just let it sit for a little bit. And then I want to get it mixing at medium speed, and we'll add the rest gradually until it's all incorporated. If need be at this stage, you can scrape it down. Mine's fairly well incorporated, so I'm just going to increase my speed to medium, medium-high, and whip for another 10 minutes until it's light and fluffy, and you'll notice a distinct change in texture. Right now it's quite watery because it's hot. But as the gelatin cools, the gelatin sets, and that's what gives it its structure and volume. Now this is about 5 minutes into beating, and you can see there's still a lot of warmth to the bowl, and it's kind of dripping off the beater. I want it to have a little bit more body before we spread it into the pan, but I don't want it super stiff because that'll make it more difficult to spread. So I'm basically beating it till it's fairly cooled down and kind of lukewarm and has a little more body than that. We're going to give it another 3 to 5 minutes. In the last few minutes of beating, you can add your flavorings. I've got my lemon juice, about a tablespoon of that, or however much you'd like, about a couple teaspoons of my zest, and I'm also going to add a teaspoon of lemon extract just to give it some extra oomph. That's good. I'm going to get it back going a little bit on lower speed just so the lemon juice doesn't splash everywhere. And we'll resume beating at high speed. Now is also the time to add color. I'm going to add a few drops of my liqua-gel food coloring to dye it a pale yellow. About 5 to 8 drops makes it the shade that you see up there. My coloring is now more evenly distributed, and I've got a little more body to this. It's kind of falling over, and the tracks of the marshmallow aren't immediately disappearing as they were before. And that's generally a good indicator that it's pretty much ready to spread. I'm going to knock the excess off the beater, and I want to move quickly at this point and get it pretty immediately into the pan, because as it cools, it'll be very, very difficult to spoon out and spread. So back to that prepared pan, I'm going to dollop it kind of evenly all over. See, if it's too thick, you end up kind of smushing the underlying sugar around. You might disrupt the coating of the pan, which I think I might have done on a batch that I did yesterday that we're going to unmold shortly. We'll see what that looks like. Let me get it spread. For this, I like to use a really long spatula, and I purposely almost drag it over the edge of the pan because it's just easier to separate the spatula. If I don't, I lift up the meringue, the marshmallow here. So if I purposely spread it over, I don't, and I get a much smoother spread on top. And the smoother the spread you get on top, the more versatility you have with these marshmallows because you can present them if you're going to decorate them from either side. Usually the bottom side will be flatter than the top side, but I've got a pretty smooth spread here. I'm not going to touch it anymore. I'm just going to sprinkle it with a little bit more sugar. And again, I'm going to do that on a big pan to capture any overflow. This is the remaining 2/3 cup sugar going down on top. 2/3 cups or so. You don't really want to see through to the marshmallow. You want to have it evenly coated with sugar all the way across the top. Okay, that looks great. Now this isn't immediately cuttable. You saw it, it was gooey and sticky. It needs to cool down further and set at least 4 hours uncovered like so until you can cut it. If you're going to make it, say, the night before you want to cut it, I generally don't let it air dry or set more than 12 hours because it can set to a certain extent. It can overset, if you will, and become then very difficult to cut with the cookie cutters we're going to cut it with. So if you're making it the night before, I would suggest letting it air dry for 4 hours and then tenting it, laying a piece of parchment paper here and then tenting it with foil so that it doesn't dry out any further than it needs to, and it will be in then a good condition to cut it in the morning. Okay, so I am back now with a tray that I did last night, but I tented it with foil. I did it right before I went to bed, but I tented it with foil as I told you to do because I knew it couldn't stay exposed for more than 4 hours. And you'll see it's much more firm. But I am going to disengage it with my paring knife from the edges, even so it's pulling away in most areas, but just in case. And then we're going to invert it onto this larger pan. Again, I like to work on a larger pan to catch any sugar overflow, and there's bound to be some. I could put the pan directly on top of it, but it's kind of unwieldy, so I'm just going to gradually flip it over like so. Drop it out. There we, nice removal. Now there's some wrinkles. This this particular marshmallow was a lot more firm when I tried to spread it, and where I had difficulty spreading it, you'll see little wrinkles. I think with the marshmallow we just spread, you would see fewer of those, but that's okay. We're gonna just cut around those. Now to cut, the key thing is this marshmallow stands about 1 inch tall, so you don't want to use cutters that have backs on them because you're going to need to pop the marshmallow out with your fingers. So you want to use one that doesn't have a back on it, like these Bunnies, which are from Cookie Cutter Kingdom, and these smaller daisies to get any areas in and around the Bunnies to make use of all of the marshmallow. These are nice heights. These are a little bit shorter, but they'll work. They might just smush the marshmallow a little bit. Now, before we cut, we always want to make sure that the cutter is completely clean. And I additionally like to smear a little of the nonstick spray on the edge of the cutter. This will make it just less likely to stick to the marshmallow and come out cleanly. So I'm going to choose a non-wrinkly area for cutting my first bunny right here. He's going to have a nice look about him, and you'll see how easily you can just pop it out from the front. He looks sweet. I'll just set him aside here on the tray until we're ready to decorate. Now you'll notice how much marshmallow is accumulated on the cutter. If I were to cut again, I'd have a much more difficult time getting that out. So I'm going to start fresh with another small bunny. I'll cut a few of these, and I'll show you how I clean the cutter. And to clean the cutter, sometimes just this paper towel is enough. Sometimes I need to run it under water to get the marshmallow off. But I usually do clean it at least every 2 cuts, if not every cut. Here's another nice flat area, so we'll cut like so. And I just try to get them as close as possible so there's not a lot of extra marshmallow, uncut marshmallow left over. But if there is, you can always take a chef's knife and cut it up into little cubes and make little tasty treats that way, or take smaller cutters like these daisies I have out to really make use of all of the marshmallow. So these cut little bunnies are cute just as they are. Perfect little bunnies. They are a little floppy because they're big right now and the marshmallow is still very fresh. It's less than a day in the pan. If you were to let these air dry, even in a covered container for another 24 hours, they would be rigid enough to stand like those that are in the sugar above us. So you can decide how you want them. If you want them very, very soft, keep them contained or eat them immediately. And if you want them a little firmer, which is also good for more of a presentation purpose, but also for eating, just let them hang out in their container a little bit longer and they'll be a bit more rigid. Now, I am a more is more kind of girl, so we're going to decorate these up, but minimally, because I want this to remain a relatively easy project. I've got lots of little decorating options here, different flowers, different tails, different little googly eyes, and I'm going to just show you how to do one of those. So I've got a little bit of blue royal icing. It's a beadwork consistency, which is perfect for making little dots, and I'm just going to make a little necklace across, this is going to be a girl bunny, across her neck, like so. And we're going to be using a lot of elements, these ferns and flowers that I made in my Easter basket video. I think I'm going to put this cute little regular rose on there. For that, I do like to work with my icing of glue consistency, which is very thick, because the thicker it is, the faster it dries. And we're just going to plant that right in the corner here, off to the side of her face. Press it in a little bit. Now, I had pre-made these little eyes, as you can see here. These are nothing more than simple royal icing transfers, and I do these also in my caterpillar video, my bookworm video, so you can see exactly how to do those. It's a wet on wet technique. The wet icing goes down, the white icing goes down wet, and then the green dots go on them immediately so they sink into the white. But once they're completely dry, I can lift them up and plant them directly on the bunny. That actually came off as a pair, which is rather convenient. Just put a little glue on the back of those and stick them in place. I think she looks sweet just as she is, but we she has to have a tail, of course. So you could pipe a tail on. You could do another royal icing transfer and just stick it down here, a bigger one. I've got these little white candies. I thought they made really fun little bunny tails in different sizes. These are white with a little raspberry showing through, so I do want to cover some of that pink and make them look a little more fluffy. And to do that, I'm just going to roll them in a little bit of white royal icing glue, coat them in that, and then coat them immediately in some white nonpareils, just to make them a little more fluffy. Okay, that looks good. And I'm just going to stick it onto the side. It will often stick to the marshmallow itself and not come off, but I am going to add a little bit more glue to the part that doesn't have nonpareils on it and stick that against the side of the bunny. And ta-da, I think she's complete. So go ahead and get creative. You can use the ribbon roses we made earlier and some of the leaves and ferns to create a little sense of garden at the base of the bunny if you want. You can decorate them in any number of ways. Just a fun and great project for Easter. Till next video, live sweetly.